Hi, this is Joe and welcome back to the Fab Lab. I purchased a new pickup truck, a Dodge 2019 Dodge Ram Classic, and what I've been doing is doing a lot of reading. This is my first Dodge. Doing a lot of reading on the forums and seeing what people are doing as far as modifications and some recommendations. So usually the first thing, or one of the first things most people purchase, is a cold air induction system or cold air intake system. So in popping the hood here, I'm looking at the airbox, the ducting from the throttle body over to the airbox, and the first thing I notice is there is a vent here, some type of ducting work that is routed into, looks like a part of the fender well. And there's a foam around here, so it looks like there's a pretty decent seal there. So, sort of an interesting thing. It looks like Dodge may have, as part of their newer models, implemented some type of a cold air induction system as part of the stock vehicle configuration. So we're going to do some testing. I have a 3 wireless temperature sensor. Let's put this down here. There's 3 channels, 1, 2, and 3. And I have, again, some wireless sensors here that measure temperature. I'm going to place these in 3 different locations. We're going to mount one inside the airbox. We're going to mount one in the engine bay outside of the airbox. And the third one we're going to mount out in the ambient air so that when we're driving we can pretty much get a comparison of the various temperatures as the truck is going through its normal operation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop off the air filter. We're going to start mounting the sensors in. I have some sticky tape, double-sided sticky tape. I'm going to mount the sensors, again, one inside the airbox, one outside the airbox in the engine compartment, and the third one out probably on the bumper, so we can get some ambient airflow over that, and then we'll measure the temperature differences. So let me reposition the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, let's pop the air filter. And what I'm going to do is put one of the wireless remotes. This one is labeled number 1. So we're going to Okay, we have the sensor mounted in. Let's go ahead and put the air filter back in. Let's put the airbox back together. And let's mount some of the other sensors now. We have one temperature sensor, number 3, mounted to the front of the grille. We have another sensor, which is number 2, which is mounted to the engine bay, just outside of the airbox. And we have a sensor, number 1, which is inside the airbox below the filter. I'm now going to mount the gauges inside the truck. We're going to take a drive, and we're going to monitor all 3 temperature sensors and try to establish if there's any great degree of temperature differential between all 3 sensors. So let's go ahead and mount that and get rolling. Okay, we are idling now. Again, for your reference, number 1 showing 87.7 degrees is in the airbox. Number 2, 89 degrees, and that's in the engine bay. And number 3 is mounted ambient temperature outside on the front of the grille. It currently is 93 degrees. So let's get rolling here. We'll do some driving. I don't know if how well you're going to see the numbers, but I'll read them out to you as we get going here. I let the temperature sensors and the base station sit for several hours, and all the readings are within 1 degree or a little bit less than 1 degree. So we should be okay as far as static temperatures go. Let's take a ride here. I'm going to do some freeway driving. I'm going to do some slow driving, and let's just watch the temperatures here, and I'll read them off to you in case you can't see them very well. Okay. I'm assuming when the truck warms up, the air shutters until the truck warms up, the air shutters are going to stay closed. So we should get some buildup of temperature inside the engine bay. So let's see what's going to happen here. Okay, we're just cruising along now, 20 miles an hour. And we're going to slowly accelerate up here. This is just a rural road I'm on now. Okay, 87.9, 90.3, and 87.3. It's just a tiny bit warmer, less than 1 degree inside the airbox box as it is to the outside. Actually, now we've just dropped down on number 3 to 85 degrees. Number 1 is 87.9, and in the engine bay it's 90.3. Okay, we're doing about 50 miles an hour now. Ambient temperature is 85.6. In the engine bay is 90.3, and in the airbox it's 87.9. Interesting. I'm doing 67 now. And the engine bay has dropped to 88.8. Engine or the airbox is 87.9, and the external temperature outside on the grill is 85.6. So it seems we get up over 50 miles an hour, we're getting some a little bit of engine bay cooling. We're just a few degrees. A few degrees over ambient, and it's 82.7 outside, 88.8 in the engine bay, and 87.9. So it looks like we got about a full degree cooler from the engine bay to inside the airbox. And we have about 5 degrees difference between the ambient air temperature and in the airbox. Okay, we have about 7 miles to go here, and then we'll get on the freeway, and we'll speed it up a little bit and see if that airbox airflow is going to help any at all. Right now, I don't see too terribly much difference between about 1 degree difference between the airbox and the engine bay, and about 5 degrees difference, about 5-6 degrees difference between ambient and in the airbox. I'm holding the camera tripod here with my hand, so if you see any vibrations or bumping, that's what it is. I'm having to drive and hold this at the same time. Okay, let's pick it up a little bit. We're up to 60 miles an hour now. Let's give the air temperature a chance to stabilize a little bit, and then we'll do a reading. Interesting, the humidity is a little higher on the ambient temperature sensor as opposed to in the airbox, which is the least amount of humidity. We have 34% humidity in the airbox, 37% humidity in the engine bay, and 48% humidity ambient. I'm seeing now about 2 degrees difference between the airbox and the engine bay. The engine bay is a bit warmer than ambient. Ambient is 82, inside the engine bay is 86.1, and inside the airbox is 84. So the airbox isn't quite as cool as the ambient temperature, but it's a bit cooler. It's a couple degrees cooler, about 2 degrees cooler than the engine bay. And we're doing about 50 miles an hour right now. I'm still waiting to get to the freeway, and then we'll speed it up a little bit, see what kind of differences in airflow we get. Okay, at this point we're doing about 40 miles an hour. We have some traffic ahead of us. 84.3 in the airbox, 85.5 in the engine bay, and 82.1 ambient. I'm also going to do some testing with different types of air filters, including a K&N air filter, and see if there's any reduction in flow or increase in flow depending on which air filter we test. Okay, we're just about ready to get on the freeway. At this point, I'm not seeing too terribly much difference between the airbox and the engine bay. We'll see when I accelerate here if we get any increased flow through the airbox intake, which again is venting out to the side of the fender. Okay, we're on the freeway now, and we're going to accelerate a bit. We're up to about 65. We're up to 70 now. Again, not much difference. 84 in the airbox, 85 in the engine bay, and 83 ambient. We're presently doing about 65, 66. I got traffic in front of me, so I can't get on it really hard. Okay, we're accelerating again here. Hopefully I can get some decent numbers. Okay, we're doing 80 presently, 84, 85, and 82. Interesting observation. I pulled off the freeway. I wanted to check the position of the camera. So I turned the engine off for a while. We started this test when the truck was completely cold. So after running about 7 to 10 miles, I stopped the car, checked the camera. I got back in and gave the chance for the engine bay to be at a temperature without any airflow going through the engine bay. As you can see now, we're up now in the engine bay to around 100 degrees, and just a few minutes ago it was 102. Okay, so we're looking right now, just sitting here idling with the engine really warm, or just warm. Our airbox temperature is 95.7, so we have about 6-7 degrees difference between the airbox temperature and the engine bay. And then we have the ambient temperature is 85. So we have right around 9-degree difference there between ambient and airbox. So interesting results. When the truck was cold, we only got about 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees difference between the airbox and the engine bay temperatures. Now that the truck has warmed up, got an operating temperature, and we stopped for a little bit, there's no airflow coming through the engine bay, we now have a much greater difference between airbox and engine bay. Notice we're back up to 102 now, so I'm going to keep on driving, and we'll drive it, let's say maybe 30 to 50 miles an hour, and we'll see what happens, if things stabilize or if the engine bay is still going to be warm. So let's start out and see what happens with this. Rather interesting about the difference in temperature between a warm engine and a cold engine. So good thing that we stopped and did a little testing on this. Okay, as you can see, just sitting here idling and waiting to pull out onto the street, the engine bay temperature went up to 105. We're 98 in the airbox and 85 in the ambient. So even with no airflow going through the airbox, even our airbox temperature is picked up a little bit. See, again, we're going 36 miles an hour now, and the ambient or the airbox temperature has climbed up to 101. We're at 108 in the engine bay. So with not a lot of airflow going through the engine at this point, our airbox temperature is increasing as well. So makes a lot of sense. You want a lot of, in order to get a cooler air, you want more airflow going through the airbox, and that's what it's doing. So just idling around, you know, around town, you know, 30 to 40 miles per hour. We're not getting a heck of a lot of airflow, and it's showing that on the temperature readings. So we'll drive a little bit more here, see if the temperatures come down a little bit in the engine bay and the airbox, and then I think we'll have just about enough information to make some either recommendations or some evaluate the performance of this this factory airbox here. Okay, I'm going to get back on the freeway here for just a mile or so and get a little airflow going through the engine and see if these temperatures are going to drop down a little bit. Okay, we're up to 55 now. Now we're about 50, 57, 58. Let's see what's going to happen if the temperatures are going to come down. We're pulling off the freeway now. And the airbox and engine bay temperatures have sort of stabilized and are almost reading the same. About 1 degree, a little less. Oh, and then we just dropped considerably on the airbox temperature. Now we're 94 in the airbox, 99 in the engine bay, and 83, almost 84 degrees ambient. And we're doing about 45 right now. Okay, airbox is 93, engine bay is 98, and ambient is 83, and we're doing about 50 miles an hour. Even at 50 miles an hour, when the engine warms up, gets at pretty much normal operating temperature, we do see a little bit of a difference between airbox and engine bay temperature. So that exterior intake that's routed to the inside of the fender does appear to be working a bit. When the engine is cold, we're getting maybe a couple degrees difference, unless you're up on the freeway getting a lot of airflow. But it looks like, again, at right around 50 or cruising speed, you are getting, you know, 3, 4, 5 degree difference there. And, you know, that's not too bad. Now again, I was hoping that the airbox temperature would be a little bit closer to ambient temperature, but that is not the case. So apparently either we're not getting a good flow through that fender area, or we're getting some warm air bleeding over. The camera died on me while I was wrapping up that last part of the video, so I'll redo that section here. I wasn't really impressed either at cold temperatures or warm temperatures, a low flow or a high flow. I was really hoping that being that this ducting here, venting to the fender, would pick up an air temperature closer to ambient, but it isn't. It's considerably warmer, and after the engine warmed up to normal operating temperature, I did not see a tremendous difference in airbox temperature versus engine bay temperature. At times there were, when we had some good flow, going freeway speeds or anything, right around legal speed limit, there was a few degrees, anywhere from, let's say, an inch or a degree and a half, up to possibly maybe 4 or 5 degrees. But at least for the stock airbox, I'm not really impressed with the difference in differential in air temperature between the engine bay, the airbox, and the ambient. I was really hoping that the airbox temperature would be much closer to ambient air temperature, which leads me to believe a lot of folks go out and purchase third-party aftermarket airbox or cold air induction or intake systems, and the two that I'm fairly familiar with are the K&N and the S&B, and they replace the stock airbox with sort of an open airbox. I believe the S&B has a plexiglass plate over the top, but again, it still is, that airbox is sitting open in both cases to the engine bay. So the question is, now again, I don't have either one of those aftermarket cold air intake systems to test. It would be really nice to test, but at the price, if it's anything like the temperature differential that we've gotten with this test, it probably isn't worth the price. And being that the K&N and the S&B, again, vent to the engine bay, I don't know if you're going to get that much of a temperature differential. On the freeway going fairly fast, when the engine is, up at operating temperature, yeah, you might pull maybe 4 or 5 degree, maybe a little bit more temperature differential, but not a heck of a lot. Now, again, I'm not a mechanical engineer, so any of you want to chime in with that on what would be an acceptable temperature differential, please feel free to leave a note. But I'm really concerned that even the aftermarket third-party airboxes and cold air induction or intake systems probably aren't reducing that airbox temperature that much. So I hope you found this video informative. Again, later I'm going to do some airflow tests with a variety of different aftermarket air filters. I want to do a K&N as well because I'm really interested in the K&N. And we'll do some airflow and some inches of H2O and see what kind of differential flows and pressures we get. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, feel free to leave comments, suggestions, ideas, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.